Okay, so the first pattern that we're looking at is about causes and solutions. Okay, so this is quite a nice style of task 2 essay to get. I think it's quite an easy one to structure. And so obviously your pattern would be going something like 1, you've got your introduction, your body 1, which would be your causes, your body 2, which would be your solutions. Okay, and then you would have to have your conclusion as number 4, your conclusion or your summary, okay, of what you talked about. The best answers will link your causes and solutions together. Okay, so to get higher task achievement and to get higher coherence and cohesion, the best essays will be able to present in body 2, you're giving the solutions to the causes that you identified in body 1. Okay, so if I said, for example, one of the causes of global warming is too much traffic and pollution from cars, then in body 2, I would suggest a solution that would say one solution, to solve the problem of pollution from cars is to invest more money in trains and buses and public transportation. Okay, so that shows that you've planned, that you've thought about it, and that you're able to create a coherent essay. Okay, so that's one of the benefits of planning a little bit before you start writing, that you can make sure you're kind of linking your causes and solutions together. Okay, because that's going to create a more coherent essay altogether. So let's take a look at the topic that this candidate has got. In many countries, the proportion of older people is steadily increasing. So what problems will this cause for individuals and society? Suggest some measures that could be taken to reduce the impact of aging populations. Okay, so what they want you to talk about is, so rather than the cause of the problem, they want to say, what are the problems about older societies and how are we going to reduce that? Okay, so even though this is usually problem and solution, this question is asking you for something slightly different. Okay, so what this is asking you to do, obviously introduction, and they're asking you in your body 1 to give some of the problems, okay, of having an older population. And then in body 2, they want you to give the solutions to these problems. Okay, so rather than causes, they want you to give problems and solutions. Okay, so, and then your conclusion. Okay, so let's take a look at what this candidate has done. The first thing I usually check when I'm looking at IELTS essays is I take a look at the overall structure. So I see we've got an introduction here. Oh, we've got a very decent paragraph body 1. We've also got a good body 2, and then we've got a conclusion here for the end of the essay, okay? So the first thing I'm thinking is, okay, this looks like a well-balanced, well-written essay. So I'm thinking this is definitely probably going to hit the word count. And one of the things your examiner is looking for when they're giving marks is to have a nice balance to the essay. So what does that mean? It means that your body 1 and body 2 are roughly the same length. Okay? And also your introduction and conclusion are roughly the same length too. Okay? One of the weaknesses of a weak candidate writing an IELTS answer is that they're going to have a very long introduction, a very long body 1, and then a very short body 2 and conclusion, because that tells me that the candidate ran out of time and didn't plan their time well, okay? But what we can see here is you've got like a sort of 2-sentence introduction. We've got a body 1 and body 2 that are roughly the same size, so that's a very good sign. And then we've also got a sort of 1 sentence but 2-line conclusion at the end, okay? So the first thing I'm thinking is that, okay, what I'm looking at before I read it, it looks like a well-planned out, well-written, sort of balanced essay in terms of that. Okay, so let's take a look at the introduction. These days, many developed countries are becoming aging societies. There are several reasons for this problem individually and socially, and various ways can be taken to improve this situation. Okay, so the first issue I have is the very first sentence is slightly grammatically incorrect. These days, many developed countries are becoming aging societies. So what this sentence literally means is that the country is becoming an aging society, which is not correct, right? A country can't change into something else, okay? So what this needs to be, these days many countries are developing aging societies. Or these days, the societies or the populations in many developing countries are becoming older. Okay, would be another way to phrase it. Okay, so they need to change the order of the sentence slightly. So it would be something like, these days, the populations in many developed countries are becoming older. Okay, that would make more sense. There are several reasons for this problem individually and socially. I like here, what they've given me here is they've given me their subtopics. Okay, so they've given me a hint about what they're going to talk about in the rest of the essay. So they're going to talk about the causes, about the individual level and the social level, and then they're also going to talk about solutions. Okay, so as an introduction, I think this is quite good. The first sentence was grammatically was slightly odd, but overall quite a good introduction. They set out the background information. They give me the subtopics. To improve, I would have liked to have seen maybe an opinion. They could have given me, the problem, the solution that they think is going to be most effective. They could have given me a little bit more detail in their background sentence. This is a little bit short. So if they're going for those higher levels, the sort of 6-band plus, they could have given me a little bit more detail here. But overall, quite a sort of reasonable introduction. This is like a body one. Increasing the number of old people has occurred personal and social problems at the same time. Has occurred. Occurred is quite passive. It's not an active enough word. So what we would say has created personal and social problems at the same time. As for individuals, the earlier senior citizens retire their jobs, the more financial burden will be taken on each working age person. For example, in many countries, the pension age starts in 160s, but the life expectancy is longer than before. It means that people's pension period is extended. This situation affects the government as well, as rising the number of old people, the government put more budget on healthcare systems and secure money for expected pension for senior people can bring about the result of the shortage of budget for other parts such as education or energy resources. Therefore, the situation of a growing age people has several detrimental effects on individuals and society. Okay. So overall, I think in terms of argument, this is looking okay. So they're identifying some of the problems of an aging population well. I've just got a couple of issues with their sentence structure. So we look here, increasing the number of old people has created personal and social problems at the same time. So we want to have here, the increasing number of old people has created personal and social problems at the same time. As for individuals, the earlier senior citizens retire from their jobs, the more financial burden will be taken on each working age person. Okay, for example, in many countries, the pension age starts in 160s, but life expectancy is longer than before. It means that people's pension period is extended. It means that the period in which people receive their pension is extended. Okay, so that's sort of clearer and more specific. This sentence was too vague before. This situation affects the government as well. As the number of old people rises, the government puts more budget on healthcare. So it should be puts the budget on healthcare. It should be spends. If we're talking about the budget, you spend the budget. So the government spends more budget on healthcare, or the government allocates more budget on healthcare systems and secures more money for the expected pensions of senior people. It can bring about the result of the shortage of budget for other parts. For other areas, parts is too vague, such as education or energy resources. Therefore, the situation of a growing aging population has several detrimental effects, good word, on individuals and society. Okay, so overall, this is quite a well-structured body one. They've picked out two sort of, issues, which is one, that working age people maybe have to pay more taxes because they're supporting the pensions of old people, and you can also reduce the budget spent on other things by the government. Okay, so they've picked out two things that are causing a problem. They have sort of explained and given a sort of detailed example of them, and here as well, which I think is good. I like that. So they've explained well, they've expanded on their point. and they've kept it quite focused on the topic of the essay. So in terms of task achievement, this is quite strong. As we've seen as I've gone through, I've been correcting some of the sentence structure. They sort of have some ongoing grammatical issues, and I can feel like this candidate is kind of in that intermediate stage where you're trying to make that jump up from intermediate to like intermediate plus. And so I feel like what this candidate does, they have a good understanding, they have quite a good vocabulary, but they're just struggling with their sentence structure a bit. And that can happen when you're trying to make that jump up, maybe from like a sort of a 6.0 band up to that sort of 6.5 or 7. So just from looking at this, the first thing I would want to tell this candidate is to go back to that sort of IELTS teacher and spend some time working on sort of sentence structure and grammar in more complex sentences. Because I can tell that they're quite confident on their simple sentences, but their complex sentences are getting a bit more difficult for me to read. So let's take a look at body 2. However, this problem can be controlled by taking action by governments, okay? So we've got a good transition here. We've got the however signaling that we're moving on to the solutions. So this problem can be controlled by taking action by governments. This is like too passive, and it's the taking action. It's the wrong tense here. However, this problem can be controlled by governments. You can say here by government action, or I mean, even if you just put this by governments taking action, it would also be okay. So it's just, again, it's the order of words that this candidate is struggling with, and the fundamental composition of their sentences is not entirely correct. First of all, governments implement laws about expanding retirement age. So we're making recommendations here. So when we're making recommendations, we want to be using sort of cautious language, conditional, so it should be something like should, okay? First of all, government should implement laws about expanding retirement age. I think they mean extending the retirement age. Nowadays, 60-year-old people are young enough to work. This is like young enough to work, and maybe would it be better to phrase it something like, are healthy enough, energetic enough to work. It means that they can contribute to pay taxes to the government by maintaining their jobs. In addition, the governments could encourage immigration in order to increase people who pay taxes. Increase the number of people who pay taxes. Many developing countries have more working age generation people, have more people of working age than developed countries. Therefore, adopting this young generation, into wealthy countries can be a rational decision to collect pension budget, can be a rational decision to increase tax collection to support the pension budget. Okay, so again, this is a good, in terms of task achievement, this is a good argument that they've picked, and they've specifically linked it to, like I said earlier, they've linked it to the problem that they identified in body 1. The problem they identified was the cost of the aging population and pension problems, and so they've specifically recommended the solution that's linked to solving the pension problem. Okay, so a problem some candidates make is they talk about two totally unrelated things. But they've specifically in body 1 talked about pensions, and then they're trying to solve the pension problem in body 2. So for example, some candidates might write something like in body 1, they're like, oh, this causes a lot of problems in terms of pensions and paying pensions, and then the solution they talk about is how to solve the health crisis of too many old people. Okay, so it would be two unrelated things. So it's much better that I like that this candidate has done that. Again, as you can see in a couple of these instances, the issue again is sort of in their sentence composition, in the order of the sentences as they've written it. Their vocabulary is good. Contribute to pay taxes, good. Retirement age, good. Government action, okay. Encourage immigration, okay. Developing countries, developed countries, adopting young generation, a rational decision. Okay, this candidate clearly has a good vocabulary, and they're confident using it, and their use of words is correct. But their issue is in the grammar and the structure of their sentences. Their sentences are not consistently, when they're trying to use these more complex sentences, they're trying to improve the sort of complexity of their sentences, and they're not always doing it accurately, which is my issue with this candidate. So that's what I'm feeling that they need to work on most of all right now. So then we get to the conclusion. To sum up, although there are several personal and social problems from a rapidly aging, it's not growing, it's aging, it can be solved by pushing back the retirement age and accepting more immigrants. Okay, so apart from this is the sort of first major issue I have with their vocabulary, where they've actually just chosen an incorrect vocabulary word. But what I like about this conclusion is that they very nicely summarize what they're talking about. What a lot of people tend to do with their conclusions is they just list everything that they talked about. To sum up, an aging population causes problems to the cost for working people and reduces the amount of taxes available while increasing the amount of pensions. While on the other hand, and they just list out everything that you've just told me in your paragraph. The good conclusion is a summary, which means paraphrasing the main theme, the main ideas of your essay. So that's what they've done here. They've said there are personal problems, there are social problems, we should push back retirement, and we should accept more immigrants. So it's a nice short summary about what they talked about, which is good, which is what I like about their conclusion. So we move into marking. In terms of task achievement, I thought this was a well-structured, well-argued, logical essay. They expand and they argue a lot of their points well. I mean, sometimes some of their arguments are a little bit too general. So, for example, we go back to here, and we can say, for example, in this sentence here, many nowadays 60-year-old people are young enough to work. It's too, it's not cautious enough, okay? It's too prescriptive. They're saying basically 100% of 60-year-old people are young enough to work, okay? So it's too generalized, It's not showing the reality of the situation. So for an academic essay, you want to be cautious. So you can just change it. Nowadays, many 60-year-old people are healthy enough to work. Okay, so just by saying many, we're accepting, okay, not 100% of 60-year-old people are young enough to work, just a lot of them. Okay, so that's something I just picked up on when I was reading through it. For task achievement, I would want to give them a 6.5. I thought that was great. Their coherence and cohesion, I liked it. They told me in their introduction what they were going to talk about. They talked about it. They summarized it in their conclusion. They had some good linking words there. It was a reasonably cohesive essay. So again, I would want to give a 6.5 for that. And vocabulary, I thought vocabulary was very good. They used a lot of specific vocabulary to the subject they were talking about. So again, I would want to give a 6.5 for that. I would have just wanted to see a little bit less, some more less common vocabulary. That's what I want to see here. And then, unfortunately for grammar, their issue was that I could tell their simple sentences were good and well structured, but their issue came while trying to use more complex sentences, okay? So I think for grammar, it would be more down at like a 5.5 level, and I would really tell them to go and work on their sentence structure. Okay, because that's what's letting them down, especially in their complex sentences. Okay, I can tell their simple sentences are good, but it really, when you're trying to make that difficult jump from sort of like intermediate to plus intermediate, making sure you're getting these more complex sentences down is like a really important thing to be doing. So I'm guessing overall, I'm going to have to do some quick maths here. I feel like it's going to work out at a 6. I'm just going to actually just check it on my calculator now. It feels like a sort of a 6 level essay here, yeah. So I think it would work out at an overall 6.0 for this one. I think if they could just work on their sentences a little bit more, this could easily bump up to the, a 6.5 or a 6.5 plus essay, just with a couple of small changes. But I think there's a lot of very positive things in this essay that I liked a lot, and I think this candidate should have a good feeling about what they did.